Welcome to Personal Injury Law Unwrapped with Randy Ferguson.
Hey everybody, welcome to Personal Injury Law Unwrapped with Randy Ferguson. I'm Matt Skye. Randy is a dedicated attorney with over 30 years of experience in personal injury and criminal law, known for his involvement in multi-million-dollar recoveries for his clients. He has also served for over 28 years as a magistrate in Madison County, Alabama. Randy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Randy, let's jump in. Share us a bit about your background and what initially drew you to pursue a career in law.
Well, I was in college. My sister was in law school. She was 2 years ahead of me. And I got to go do some testifying in fake trials at the law school. And I never really thought about being an attorney. I really enjoyed it. And so after that, I went ahead and applied and got into law school and been doing it ever since.
And so, okay, you joined the world of being an attorney. What led you specifically to personal injury law?
You know, I think what probably led me to that, I had a brother who died in an parachuting accident when I was 9. And the college, we had a lawsuit against the college for the parachute had been packed incorrectly. And so I think that was probably it. I saw that there's a lot of things that insurance companies do and things that are unfair. And so I think that's probably what kind of led me into the personal injury side.
So it's a very personal journey into personal injury in that regard. Anything in particular that led to that transition other than this obviously significant event?
Well, I clerked for the presiding judge here in Madison County, and I got to see a lot of cases. And, I got to see criminal cases, domestic cases, and personal injury is just something I enjoyed. I taught anatomy and physiology biology labs when I was in law school at the undergrad at the University of Alabama. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed biology, anatomy and physiology and stuff. And so I think it just naturally, that's what I was drawn to.
That's actually really fascinating. I don't think I've heard that. How does that work with biology? Does that ever integrate into your practice?
It really helped. I didn't have to learn the bones. I didn't have to learn the nerves, which, I deal with when a lot of car accidents, motorcycle accidents and stuff. So it really made it easy because I already knew the anatomy and physiology part. And so it's something I didn't have to learn.
So if you could break down for us, when you're dealing, say, with a very severe accident, there is a large biology component, am I correct? Because you're dealing with, at times, very sophisticated injuries. So you might have a little more base knowledge than having to, say, typically call in a number of medical experts.
I'm able to pretty much determine based on the medical records and charts and stuff, what we can prove in court and what we can't. We normally will only bring in accident reconstructionists and those kind of things, but on the anatomy and physiology side, I can normally tell if we're going to be able to get that in front of a jury and a jury is going to believe the evidence. So I don't really have to go out there and hire people to tell me that.
And how significant when you do have to pull in a team, say it is beyond the scope of your own training and, base knowledge in terms of biology, in terms of medical conditions, how large are those teams for a client usually? It
really depends. On trucking accidents, we have to bring in experts who have training in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Guidelines. In certain types of injuries, we have to bring in experts with chemicals and those kind of things. So we still have to use experts a lot in certain type of factory accidents and things. But in a car accident, unless we're trying to determine speed or we're trying to determine exactly how the accident happened, it makes it easier because I don't have to bring those people in.
So this is something I've always wondered myself. How do you determine which experts to pull in? Because it's so important when it's someone's personal injury case like this.
Well, that's a good question because there's a lot of people out there saying they're experts that aren't experts. So I think the first thing you do is you talk to other attorneys. You look at other cases that have been tried, experts that have testified. You look at their qualifications. There's people that are experts, they say, out there on slip and fall, but they've never had any training at all. So we really look at their credentials. We look at, are they professional witnesses or are they doctors who are there really determining, what the evidence is. We don't want somebody that's going to say just anything. We want an expert that's going to tell us the truth and be able to explain that to a jury.
So would you say that the key really is specialization, like rather than, say, having a series of doctors you regularly turn to, it's really finding the right person for any given case?
Yeah, there are some groups out there that what they do is they provide experts in all different fields. So we do look at those. There are some very good experts that do that, but we don't normally have to have 1 to 2 experts per case at the most, and those are usually maybe a neurosurgeon, maybe an orthopedic, something like that.
And when you have these cases, so let's say you're taking all these different experts, you're going to trial potentially, or maybe not going to trial, how long does the process take between someone being injured and potentially seeing some kind of reward in some form?
That depends on the county and it depends on the state. There are some counties that have civil cases that are 4, 5, 6 years old. There are some that get you to court within 9 months on a jury trial. Of course, almost all of them are jury cases. Workers' comps are not, but most of them are jury cases, and the backlog because of other cases like criminal cases they have to do and stuff. Sometimes the civil cases take a backseat to the people that are in jail on those cases. It can take normally around 2 years to get to court from the time you file the lawsuit.
Okay. And so what's like the longest you've seen?
We're working on a couple death cases right now, chemical exposures in Decatur, and they happen in 2019. We're doing our first mediation, it's the second mediation on this part in September. So we're, 5 years out, and we don't have a trial date yet.
Wow, that's incredible. And just curious on the inverse, what's the shortest you've seen? How fast can these go sometimes?
Some of them get fast-tracked, and so I've had some set as quick as 6 months, which is usually too fast to be able to get discovery done, get experts and stuff lined up. So sometimes you have to get those continued out a little bit.
So when you're working with a client and you're preparing them for this process, what are some of the things you advise to them? How can they deal with it? Because it's a long emotional journey for people. They've been through an accident, and now they have a legal matter on top of it.
Well, with death cases, it's probably harder. With soft tissue cases, of course, those cases settle much quicker. There's less treatment. When you have broken bones, back surgeries, and those kind of things, it's often tough because they don't have insurance. They're not working. So, you work with them to try to help them if they need to try to get funding to live on until it's over with. We sit down with them, explain everything to them, explain depositions on what they're going to have to do. Make sure, look, they're going to know your prior history, tell the truth, tell them where you've been to the doctor, because if not, when you get in court, they're going to be able to show the jury that what you told them wasn't true.
So that's a great point on what is or isn't true. And this is something we've heard when we've spoken to a number of personal injury lawyers. It seems documentation is so vital. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, documents are really important, especially in the medical record portion, because a lot of people say, well, I've never had a problem, or, I just had a little back pain. But understand insurance companies and defense attorneys are very smart, and they know how to look at your records, and they can go back as far as it takes, and they will find a record 5 years, 10 years ago where you said that your back pain was so bad that you can't walk. So it's really important that you tell the truth in those medical records, and it's really important on how the doctor documented what you told them. Oftentimes you'll get medical records where the doctor puts down something, the client says, I never told him that. But you've got to tell the client, look, that's what the record shows is this many years ago. They're going to have it. Tell the truth. We can explain that in front of a jury. The medical records are gold. If they're done right and the doctors put down what the client has told them, it makes a huge difference in front of a jury.
So when someone is injured, would you advise them to see a doctor, get that documentation as soon as possible, or is it better to reach out to you, get guidance, and then make sure they get the right medical documentation? Is there a either or way of going at this?
Well, I have clients that call me while they're sitting in their car after an accident, which I don't recommend. But I have clients that call and, shortly after the accident, and they say, well, I'm not hurt today. It happened yesterday. I tell them, sometimes you may be fine and that's it. Sometimes 3 or 4 days later, you start hurting. So if you're not hurting, we're not one of these law firms that says go run to the hospital and tell them you're hurting to have them check you out. A day or two, if you're not sore and you're okay and you don't need treatment, you don't get treatment. There's too many law firms are sending people to the exact same doctor no matter what the accident is and telling them to get treatment they don't need. So we take it serious that they get the proper treatment with the correct doctor. So, 3 or 4 days later, if you're sore, get to the doctor. Do not wait 4 to 6 weeks. Do not wait, longer than that, because a good defense attorney and insurance company is going to say, how do we know that this is even from the accident? You could have fell at home. You could have tripped coming out of your office. So you want to get treatment as soon as possible if you need it. But don't go get treatment you don't need.
So it really seems like kind of building that paper trail within relative recency of an occurrence is imperative. Am I right?
It's probably the most important thing to prove your damages is that you show that you went for treatment as soon as possible, that you needed, and you followed through with that treatment. I get so many clients who go to the doctor recommends therapy for a certain period of time, and then they just quit going. That doesn't help your case at all, because then they say, well, if you were really hurting, you would have went. And so you want to get the treatment that's necessary, follow the doctor's instructions, go all the way through with your treatment, and and go to the doctor so that he can close your file and say that you're finished with your treatment.
Let me ask you this also, just in terms of you're touching on pre-existing conditions versus the injury. How do you delineate between the two? How do you make that distinction when speaking either to a jury or to an insurance company? How do you make that?
Well, it can be a hard decision with bulging disc and those kind of things. Most people have degenerative disc disease as you get older. It's just something your body wears out. I mean, anybody can have degenerative disc disease. I got hit in an accident about 5 years ago. My college roommate's an orthopedic surgeon. I went to him, did an x-ray. I had degenerative disc disease. I've never had back pain problems in my life, but we all have it. So it's important that you get the right tests, and if there's prior treatment, you get those x-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, and you see those, and then you look at the treatment and the MRIs and CAT scans you have now and see if there's a difference. Oftentimes, you have a herniated disc which is going to stand out, or some other type of injury. But, if that x-ray or MRI looks exactly like the one you had 5 years ago, it makes it much harder to prove that the pain you're in is just from this accident. And, oftentimes people will say, I wasn't having this problem. And that's often true, but juries look at the MRIs and stuff and say, well, it doesn't look any different than it did before, so how do we know you're telling the truth?
Is it good advice for people to see their doctors regularly in that sense, just so that you have a clear record of your existing health at any given point in time? I can almost imagine a scenario where you have a severe injury, but there's no proof of anything prior.
Well, that goes both ways. So if you have treatment, let's say 2 years ago, you had a sore neck and you have treatment and it shows it. You have an accident 2 years later, it shows the same thing, they're going to say it's pre-existing. Right. If you didn't have that test 2 years earlier, you don't know. And so it's easier to show you're now having the problems. Here's the the diagnosis and treatment, for this injury. And it's easier to prove it to a jury. If you have an x-ray every year on your neck and it shows that same problem you had in this accident, it's going to be hard to prove that it's accident related.
And how often do your cases go to jury?
Probably 90% of car accidents normally are pretty straightforward as to liability. So I would say about 90% probably settle either in mediation or prior to an attorney even getting involved. It really is determined by, is there enough insurance available? It determines, did you have surgery? And a lot of it is, do you have pre-existing problems? But, a majority of your smaller cases, soft tissue things, most all of them get close to settling, but you'll have a few percentage that don't.
So you deal with a lot of different clients, people from severe death and injury to, maybe somewhat more repairable injuries. What do you find most rewarding about the work you do? The more serious injuries you get, the more of a reward for. You feel like you've accomplished something for that family. The death cases we're dealing with, the different one, motorcycle accidents, I just settled one in Nashville, a death case, and he had no children and no wife, but his family received the money, and I had a lot of satisfaction in, making their lives as good as they could be after that accident. The motorcycle accidents are usually either very serious injury or death cases, and I think you get the most satisfaction if people have children and things, that you make sure they're taken care of, and that money is there for them to grow up and to go to college, and for the spouse not have to worry about those kind of things. You touched on one, and obviously without giving any specifics as to who, but are there any cases over the years that just really stand out for you that were, particularly rewarding? I think probably the worst case, the one that probably bothered me the most, is we had a television tower here in Huntsville that it was 1,000 feet tall, and it collapsed. There was a company that pulled it down. They were doing maintenance.
put too much tension and brought it down. And there were 3 people on top of it who fell 3,000 feet, or 1,000 feet, I'm sorry, and died. My client was in the emergency room, with just a very severe injuries, broken bones, but he was still alive. And he had, I think it was an 18-month-old child, and they were from South America. And he was in town doing that work. And I think that one was because it took a while because 3 people got killed. There were law firms from other states, but we were able to get a very good settlement and structured settlement to protect that child up until he's in his 30s, where he'll get the rest of his money at that point too. And so I think that case probably stands out the most because I was on site up on the mountain and walked the site and saw all the steel, that 1,000 feet of steel on the ground, that this guy just suffered terrible injuries.
Yeah, what an unbelievable thing to endure. So looking ahead, are there any aspirations or goals you have within this field of personal injury law? How do you envision the future of your practice?
Again, I see a lot more accidents in this area now. The Huntsville area is growing incredible amounts. The accidents, I know over the 4th of July, I know they were in ALEA, Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, had 12 different deaths during the holiday. It's everything from drowning accidents to motorcycle accidents to car accidents. And so I see it growing here in North Alabama because the population is growing. And as the medical bills go up, the costs go up. I wish the state would increase the requirements for minimum insurance. The minimum insurance in this state is $25,000. If you get hit and get checked out in the hospital with an MRI or something, that $25,000 is gone. So I wish they would raise the minimum, but the problem is there's still a lot of people that can't afford the minimum. So I think you're going to see more people based on what's going on in accidents without insurance.
As we wrap up, if you had one key takeaway for our listeners, what would that be?
Document everything. If you have an accident, any type of accident you have, especially workers' comp, where you have to notify your employer, as soon as possible, or you don't have a case, document everything. If you have an accident, always take pictures of the other car, their tag. Take pictures of your car before the cars are moved, unless you're in the traffic where you really need to move them. Tell the officer everything. We see a lot of times where people don't give a statement or witnesses don't give a statement, and then they leave and you never find them again. So document everything, get treatment. Do not, under any circumstance, talk to an insurance company on the other side until you talk to an attorney, because they're not there to help you at all. They're there to get evidence to deny your case.
It's very sound advice. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to Personal Injury Law Unwrapped with Randy Ferguson. To learn more, visit fergusonferguson.com. You can also find him on social media. Randy, thanks so much for your time today.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.